Hello, I wanted to display a game I actually played on the internet, which I thought was really instructive because at the end there were a lot of really neat combinations, and it actually shows also that you know you can kind of misplay the beginning and the opening and you don't have to slip up in too many ways. You just start accumulating all these little errors and they lead to a really bad position. So I started with d4 here, d5, c4, and I got the Slav defense. Knight f3 is the most played move and it's the book line, but knight c3 is actually being played now because either way it transposes there. The correct move for black here is knight f6. However, my opponent played knight d7. I'm not really sure why or what the purpose is behind this move, except to preemptively protect the knight. I'm guessing that since the knight is coming to this square, then he's going to be able to defend it. So I just develop normally, and the knight comes out. Knight f6. Here I play e3. I could also take the pawn. This is a possibility, which is actually the recommended move. And then after the pawn recaptures, then the queen can come to the c file where it will eye the long diagonal, and it could actually come in conjunction with the rook after the bishop moves out. So, but I didn't play that. My opponent grabbed the c file with the queen before I did. But I thought I would just calmly develop my bishop, since the king, my opponent's king, is a little bit hemmed in, is not able to castle, and needs two moves to castle, whereas I could do it on the next after the next move. So I move my bishop out. Here it's actually a good idea for black to take the c pawn and make the bishop lose a tempo by having to recapture and not have to move it twice. But my opponent chose not to do that, and that's not a necessary move, but it's actually probably a recommended move here. e6 is also a good move. Here we're getting into a semi-Slav type structure. A semi-Slav structure usually involves this triangle formation of the pawns, and then after white usually takes, then it's going to be this pawn which takes back. But I captured here. My opponent should have captured with the e-pawn, but incorrectly captured with the knight. And that allows me to gain a tempo, which I do. The knight's best square is actually to come to f4. However, my opponent chose to come to this square, which in turn, as you'll see, will fall to e5. After castling, of course. e5 right now would be a little too quick. Here I think this is not a good move. The computer didn't like it much either. The main idea is that black wants to fianchetto the bishop on this diagonal and then castle. But in reality, since I've already castled and black is a little bit behind, it would be a little bit better for the bishop to just get out all at once and come to a diagonal such as this, or even here. Well, actually that might not work right away, but either way, bringing out the bishop on the other diagonal instead of on g7 would actually be a better idea, I think. But what I should have played here is e5, and actually you could get a very interesting game where you have this pawn shield, and black can try and break it up, but you get a really nice structure out of it. And the good thing is that if the bishop does come to g7, then you're going to have a pawn formation which hems in and blocks in the bishop. But I actually just played solidly rook e1. It's just preparing the push, since the rook is defending this pawn. And it also just develops me a little bit more. There's no need and no rush to do all these things. That was a mistake. So here's what I was talking about losing time in the opening and making small mistakes which get you into a really bad position. I could take advantage. This push right here really does nothing for black except guard continue to guard this square, the b5 square, and the knight's not going to come to this square or the bishop. So really there's no need for the pawn to push. Instead, black was better off just playing off its normal plan and moving the bishop to g7 and castling instead of wasting time with this move. But a6 was played anyways, and now I could strike with e5. So I play bishop g5, preparing e5. I think I play it after bishop g7, and black does play bishop g7 here, and then e5. And the knight naturally has to come to d5 here. The knight can actually retreat to another square, but it wouldn't be safe for the knight to go back. And then coming here wouldn't be such a great idea after simply pushing up and attacking the knight. Then the knight would be forced to the knight would be captured in that case. So the knight does go to d5, and I get rid of that knight, and now I could place my rook on c1 and gain this long open c-file for my piece, and that's actually going to be a really good position for me, because the queen now has to lose a tempo, and I get a lot of openings for invasion along this rank later on with my rook. So the queen moves, and here, since I'm going to do two things with the queen, I'm going to defend my bishop and also defend the pawn. Also, the bishop can actually come here and threaten to take this piece, and it's reinforced. And then after there's a hole, if there's a hole in this region here, then it is easy for me to invade later on after the king is castled into an opening in the dark squares. So the king castles here, and here I play a move that really wasn't necessary. I played bishop e7, and then after the rook moved to e8, I might have just as well played bishop a3, but instead I just kind of anchored my bishop there on d6. And here, the bishop which guards the king's position is offered up, and I see that I actually have a lot of pieces to attack with. I have the knight, I have the queen, I have the rook that can come up and actually can swing over. So I thought that this piece over here, which is a defender, would be better off if it were captured, and that I did. I captured the bishop, and then the knight recaptures. The knight recaptures sensibly to actually have a little bit better position in terms of defending, h7 and even g5. So it's not a terrible move to recapture with the knight. Anyways, I start kind of a crude attack here. The idea is that the queen is actually going to be attacking the weak pawn, and then the knight's going to hop in and attack the pawn, And then the rook's going to come up and attack the pawn. And everything is going to be focused on f6. And of course, if the pawn is to push up, if the pawn is actually to move up, even up here, then I could just capture en passant, and then have a pawn that could actually invade in these squares. So it wouldn't be a good idea for black to do that. And now black is going to begin to defend. So the queen moves back to d8, and it's actually to defend the dark squares. The knight invades. The queen defends f7. And then here's the deadly rook lift, which right here the computer is giving black a 5-pawn disadvantage. Here really black can actually protect himself by playing h6, and you know, I could get some attacks on the g-pawn, but I think black can be solid here if he just plays that move, and that's probably the only saving move here. But instead, black chose to play king g7, which I don't quite understand. I don't think there was anything else but h6 to save the day here. And then here we go. We've got this very, very strong attack on f7. You know, the queen is about to eye up the square, and here black's just in trouble now. And we begin to start to disassemble black. And there's actually some very interesting sacrifice here. And this is actually what I wanted to show from this game, is that there's some really cool tactics here on how to actually mate and using this bishop sacrifice. Here, knight f8 is the only move. And then I could play rook c7. If we go back and black decides to capture to accept the sacrifice, then you have a situation in which black is going to get mated by the rook lift on the c file. There you go. So it's not recommended that black take that sacrifice, although most players would take it. So knight f8. And then this is where the rook on the c file actually comes into play, becomes very handy. It could be used to deflect the queen. Here, if the queen takes the rook, then you have a forced mate by simply taking the pawn again and then bringing the rook into the attack. Mate. So black is actually forced to take the bishop. And then we start our mating net. We take the queen, trade it off, check, check, take the knight, down, down, and everything's forced. There's nothing black can do about it. Mate. Which I think is pretty cool, all with this bishop sacrifice. However, the move I played was actually rook c7. The idea is that the knight can no longer come to the defense of the king without actually sacrificing the queen, or to pin the knight to the queen. And black just keeps shifting around his king desperately with probably 10 minutes on his time clock. And here I actually take the pawn with a much stronger attack, and black resigns. I think if black recaptures here, then we have a very many ways to win. I think this would be one way, you know, where everything's forced, and that would be it. Thanks for watching.